What's going on YouTube? Hope everybody out there is having a great and fabulous day. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Pretty much, how the hell are ya? Welcome back guys, and today we're going to be talking about the Italian motorcycling manufacturer Paton. But before we get into that, I just want to take a minute to thank everyone that watched my last video, everyone that left a comment, a like, and to those of you that subscribed, thank you. I just cracked over 100 subs and it wouldn't be possible without you. That just gives me fuel to keep on doing what I'm doing. So really do want to thank everybody. I really do appreciate it. It does mean a lot to me. Now with that, let's get right into it. Paton motorcycles. The first time I ever saw a Paton, I saw the Paton SR1, believe it or not, while I was playing Ride 4. Yes, the video game. I thought to myself, is that a real bike? At the time I didn't think so. Fast forward, and yes, it's definitely a real bike. An Italian by the name of Giuseppe Patoni founded Paton Motorcycles right after 1957, after the company that he was working for, FB Mondial, decided to pull out of GP racing. Patoni decided that he wanted to continue in the GP spectrum and gave birth to Paton. In the early 60s, after Giuseppe, better known as Pep, pretty much let go from his former job because they decided to pull out of GP racing, he opened up his factory doors. And what I mean by factory is more like a two-car garage door. Patoni and his previous co-worker, Leona Totoni, they were starting to work and carry the development of a 250cc twin that they were working on FB Mondial. So pretty much Leona Totoni was the designer and Paton was a chief mechanic. Started working this on their spare time, and initially after they got their first bike set up, it didn't really do great. I mean, it had pretty poor results, but Patoni wasn't discouraged. On the opposite, he was actually excited with more of a challenge to push his development of this new engine. It finally made its racing debut in 1964 at the Modena circuit, and after a few months finally was able to score a podium finish in third place with Alberto Pagani in the lightweight class. It would reinforce to Patini that he really had something with potential. In the coming years, Pep was able to score British rider Mike the Bike Halewood. Halewood would be able to score 7th with the Paton 125, and Mike and the bike would make their debut later that year. In the following 2 years, the engine, recognized as Giuseppe Patoni's masterpiece, would be modified first up to 350 cc's and finally to 500. And with this version, it was going to be ridden by Italian champion Angelo Percamonte. At the decade's end, the Italian half-liter was still in really good shape, winning the second place in the 1969 Italian Championship with Franco Tarlsbani, and a fourth absolute in the World Championship ranking, this time with an English rider, Billy Nelson. Notice that the engine of this bike is a cutting-edge unit for the period, because of its central gear distribution with 4 valves per cylinder and a cassette gearbox, all features impossible to find elsewhere. Moreover, if you think that there were a product of a single man and not of a luxury R&D department in a big factory, a man helped by his friend day after day after working normal hours as a mechanic for Lancia, I mean, this is the kind of story that just gives me goosebumps. This is not, the guy doesn't have an insane factory with like a bunch of engineers and working. I mean, like, it's a guy literally probably in a shed, in a garage, in a barn, whatever the case, and he's like building an engine, building a motorcycle that's actually polling and even winning championships. It's just, this is the stuff that I live for. It blows my mind. It's just one of those feel-good stories in motorsports. At the start of the 70s proved fruitful for the Paton. The 500cc 4-stroke continued its racing career both in Italy and abroad. Paton would be using a 4-valve head design, which would later be adopted as standard, and is still what most modern bikes use up until this day. After debuting at Monza in 1968, Paton would be transitioning their Bellolita frame to a bimoto frame. This would also be a first for Bimoto to find themselves in 500cc GP series. I really don't know why they changed over to the bimoto frame, because their frame did actually better than the bimoto one, so maybe they saw some potential in it. Maybe they thought they could maybe tweak it a little bit. In 1975, Armando Torrecata and Virginio Ferrari would be landing their spot on the Paton team. Between 1975 and 1976, Giuseppe Pattini had to retire his masterpiece of a 4-stroke engine in favor of the 2-stroke. Pretty much Virginio Ferrari was not happy with the way the bike performed, and he was the leading actor of this transition. Clearly did not like it and had to fold in. Paton had to fold, and because at the end of the day, he's not the one that's riding it. This step wasn't an easy one. After a terrible season, Giuseppe Pattoni, now helped by his younger son Roberto, decided to drastically reduce their competitions and dedicated all their time to develop this disrespectful engine, aka their 2-stroke engine. Pep hated the 2-stroke. He referred to it as a disrespectful engine. I mean, coming from, how different they are, he hated the sound, the characteristics. He would always refer back to his 4-stroke as being a superior and respectful rumbling, which to him was a soothing sound. Get rid of their 4-stroke design, the 4-head valve, all that has to go, and they have to start fresh and make a 2-stroke that's going to be competitive and has a possibility of pulling and winning races. In the early part of the 80s, Pattoni and his son would continue to work hard on the development of this new 2-stroke engine design, with the objective to elevate the performance and reliability needed to be able to go back into competitions. In 1983, they were able to produce the C1500, an important one for the small Italian factory, as it would be the first project participated by Roberto Totone, Giuseppe Tottoni's son, and Claudio Colombo, which started as Paton's frame builder and corporation that still exists to this day. The engine would share the same architecture as the 1976 one, but brings a lot of improvements engineering in the internals. With the support of the studies and experiments conducted by other factories and engine experts all over the world, proved to be exponentially important. Paton was the first factory to produce in 1976 the first V and single crankshaft, which was later adopted by Honda for its famous and multi-world championship engine. Time goes on, but after the 4-valve in 1968, the engine architecture was a practical demonstration on how passion, talent, and determination in challenging the competitors allowed this small factory to be a technical frontier compared to many competitors with much bigger financial, human, and technical resources. The quality of Pattoni's technical developments are demonstrated from the results, which was best when he got 3rd place in the 1988 European Championship with Vittorio Scatatoli. During the awards ceremony, all the team members were celebrating except for one, Giuseppe Tottoni. He decided to enjoy this moment all alone and from afar, already thinking about his next improvements for the next coming races. The better part of the 90s, it came with a lot of trial and error for Paton. So they were playing with a couple different V configurations. So they started at 115 degrees, they went down to 90. They were actually able to score some championship points very early on in the season at the Monza Grand Prix with Vittorio Scatola. So unfortunately, the performance gap against its competitors ultimately led to the engine's abandonment for a new V-shaped at 70 degrees, and that would be the last generation of the 2-stroke racing Paton engine. What happened after that is they ended up taking a break from racing to really crank down, try to gather up as much information as they possibly can so they could rejoin the circuit maybe in a year or two, so they can get a better performing engine, performing bike that can possibly win them races. The problem was, during this hiatus that they were on, they were unable to get a company that will produce carburetors for their bike. Because of their engine architecture, the engine was so small that they weren't able to find somebody that would provide them with what they needed. But after they were able to get the carbs they needed, and from the help from Honda, they were finally able to come back. In '94, they were able to make their debut with their French rider Jean Perry. And during this early pre-championship test, Paton was doing all right, but unfortunately, Jean Perry did have a crash during warm-up. Now, I don't know, the details are kind of obscure. Paton was refused automatic registration, like pretty much where they just wouldn't allow him to race. Maybe there was some politics going on behind the scenes, but after almost 40 years of racing, he was not allowed to race. But this was definitely not enough to stop Giuseppe Paton, which he decided to continue the new development of a new bike and participate as a wild card. That meaning that he would pay the most part of his expenses on his own. With all that determination and passion that our dear old friend Pep does have, unfortunately, he was not able to fulfill that dream because sadly, on August 30th, 1999, our dear old friend Giuseppe Paton, aka Pep, fell victim to a heart attack during the race weekend at Imola. Despite the death of Giuseppe Paton in 1999, Roberto continued developing the team's racing bikes, but the team would only score 1 point in the 2000 Grand Prix motorcycle racing season as a wild card entry, when one of their riders finished 15th at the Sachsenring Ring with their PG 500R machine. Now, with the introduction of the PG 500, it used a little bit of a different engine. What they happened to do was they decreased their bore size and they increased their stroke. That, coupled with the fact with a little bit of body changes, they also changed their swing arm and their frame. Pretty much the bike had a few changes. It wasn't very significant, but the main killer for Paton was back early 2001 with the arrival of the 4-strokes and the highly expensive MotoGP, which now allowed for a double capacity 1000cc, and with the clear intent to push 2-strokes into retirement by the FIM. Roberto Paton and his team decided to pull out of GP racing after 2001. Mainly due to the ever-rising cost in the sport, which were now needed to create a new 1000cc 4-stroke MotoGP bike. The Paton team just did not have that budget. During the season, Paton did have a sponsor, but unfortunately their riders just weren't up to par. One of their riders did not score any points whatsoever, and he was actually DQ'd out of 2 races. Another rider crashed his bike the first 20 minutes at the first practice session and broke his ankle at the British Grand Prix. Now, with all that bad and unfortunately the bikes having to leave MotoGP, there has been some good in the last 10 years or so. At the end of 2016, Paton was acquired by SC Projects, and the new owners Stefano Lavanza and Marco Di Rossi, together with the historic Team Paton, started a series of important investments to bring Paton back to the racing world. In 2017, we saw a revamped version of the Paton SR1 competing in the Isle of Man TT. The team showed up with its official capacity and full structure, bringing home a historic win. 2018 was a year of consideration, a dream team. You got people like Michael Dunlop and Joey Thompson. Almost a perfect race with the victory of Michael Dunlop. They managed to get their 5 bikes in the first 6 positions. Currently, you can go ahead and buy one of these bikes, and they are street legal. I can only imagine how this bike would feel on the road. It seems like an ultra lightweight, crazy nimble motorcycle. I doubt I'll ever be able to see one, let alone ride one, but this story, all it really comes down to is when you have determination and passion for anything, you already have a lot of the hard part done. And that is the story with Giuseppe Paton and Paton Motorcycles. Thank you all for watching, and with that, ride safe, stay up, 2 wheels down. Peace.